Books, books. I like books. I'm gonna read them all. Hi readers, Chris here. Welcome to my channel where I review fantasy, Stephen King, all sorts of books. Today I'm going to be doing my April wrap-up and my May TBR. So April was an interesting month for me. It was super busy. I did not do a vlog in April. I'm going to try to do one for May, but things just got crazy. So here is my 20-second life update. Work is busy. I'm working so many hours. If anyone has ever been involved in a project where like you're trying to get a system, a program, a process up off the ground, that's basically what I've been working on, and this is it. Like, it's happening now. So April was like the final push. Lots of work going on. It was really crazy. I still managed to finish all 7 books that I planned on reading in April. So I'm really excited to talk about how I am ranking them, because every single book that I read this month had things that I liked about it and also things that I didn't quite like about it. There's only one book in particular that I think is pretty near perfect, but I'm gonna tell you how I rank all these, starting with my 7th favorite book of the month, Desperation by Stephen King. This is the 36th book that I've read in my Stephen King journey. So yeah, I've read a lot of Stephen King books up until this point. And this one started out really promising. We have a bunch of different characters who are traveling through this like random backwater town in Nevada, and there's a corrupt cop that lives there, and he pulls people over and then he arrests them for like made up reasons, and then they get taken to jail and they find out that it's not a regular jail. Like, this cop is totally crazy, totally gone off the deep end. The first half of this book had everything that I like about Stephen King books. It had a great creepy factor. It had interesting and varied characters, from young characters to older characters, female characters, everything in between. I thought that this was going to be a really fun, creepy ride. But then in the second half of the book, it starts to drag. And again, this is something that Stephen King does a lot, but it just kind of went on and on. There was way too much backstory, way too much setup, and I really kind of lost interest. Like, it was really hard for me to stay connected through the end of the book. So it started out so good, but I don't think that it ended on a high note. I think the back half of the book probably could have been cut in half with the number of pages. So that's why it's number 7, but it did still have some good things going for it. So if you are a Stephen King fan, I do think this one is probably worth reading at some point. My 6th favorite book of May is going to be The Guardians of Ga'Hoole, The Capture by Kathryn Lasky. Now, this is an older book. I think it came out in like the early 2000s, and I had always wanted to read it because I saw the animated movie when it came out, and I loved the animated movie. I thought it was great, so I thought, hey, I'll give this series a try. I've actually had this book for like, I don't know, forever, like 15 years. I never read it, and I thought it would be a good time to. I thought this book was super cute. It's super cute. It's about a young owl who basically falls out of his nest, and then he gets kidnapped, he gets snatched, he gets brought to this orphanage where all of these other owls, these baby owls that have been snatched, they're all in this orphanage being run by these, you know, kind of creepy, evil, older owls that are making them all do these very specific things. And the story is really cute, but my problem with the book is it never really explains like what is going on. This is the first book in a series, and there are a number of different books in this series. According to this inside flap, there's 15 books in this series, 15. And yes, they're middle grade, so they're quite short, but the book never explains what the hell is going on at this orphanage. So they have all these baby owls. They are hypnotizing them into forgetting their names. They are like plucking their feathers so they can't learn how to fly. Like they're doing all these weird things. The book never tells you why. Never tells you why. And there's not a complete story here. There's like, this book is basically half a story, and you have to read the other books to like get the rest of the story. And if you've been around my channel for a while, you will know that I do not like that. I don't like that. I want my book to be a complete story. You can leave things open-ended and leave things for the future, but you know, it should be a complete story. It should have a clear beginning, middle, and end. This does not. It has a beginning and it has a middle. There is no end. So what there is here is very cute and it is very fun, and I could see this being a really engaging adventure tale for younger readers. But I do not like that it's not a complete story. So that would be my one criticism. That's why it's number 6 and a little bit lower in my ranking. My 5th favorite book in April is Covet by Tracy Wolff. This is the 3rd book in her Crave series, and I have really been enjoying the Crave series. It's basically an updated version of Twilight. We have a young girl, falls in love with a vampire. She's going to a school with supernatural creatures. There's witches and dragons and all sorts of stuff going on, and in the 2nd book, they set up this love triangle between the main character, Grace, and then these 2 vampire brothers. But in this one, it really just focuses on one of the vampire brothers, Hudson, Grace and Hudson. And I did enjoy this book. I thought it's a great 3rd, installment in this series. However, I did find it slightly less exciting than the first 2 books. In the first book, Crave, everything was new, everything was exciting, so that one was really fun. In the 2nd book, Crush, there's a lot going on in that book. There's tournaments, and there's the introduction of this big council and the circle, and Grace finds out so much stuff like about herself and her own magic abilities. I feel like in terms of the plot, as chunky as this book is, not a lot actually happens in it. I feel like the book is primarily focused on the relationship aspect until the end. There's a lot that happens at the end of the book, but to get to there's a lot of filler, And yes, you could say that this series is primarily a romance series. However, I felt like the romance was very much balanced with the action in the first 2 books. This one felt a little off balance to me, so I still enjoyed it. I just don't think I liked it as much as the first 2 books. However, I do like Grace and her relationship in this one a lot better than her relationship with the other vampire in the beginning of the series. My 4th favorite book of April is Once Upon a Wardrobe by Patti Callahan. This book was recommended to me by a friend, Kristen, over at Kristen's Reading Nook on Instagram. Kristen has recommended a bunch of books to me before, and a lot of times they're like books outside my comfort zone, and this was definitely outside my comfort zone. So it's fiction, but it's about a young girl who has a very sick brother, and her brother is obsessed with the Chronicles of Narnia. So the setting that this book takes place in is basically after The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe was published and became like a super popular children's book. So her brother is basically dying. He's obsessed with this story. He loves it so much, and he really wants to know like where this story came from. How did the author, C.S. Lewis, how did he come up with these ideas? Where did the lion come from? The witch, all the characters. And so our main character in the story, her name is Megs, she kind of makes it her mission to go and find the author and ask him like, hey, how did you come up with this stuff? And Megs is she has a very logical, analytical mind. Like, she's going to school for mathematics and physics, like she's very rigid and like, believing what you see, and thing, you know, math, everything has an equation, everything has a certain rule and all this kind of stuff. But of course, as she meets the author and starts to learn more about his stories and, you know, hears about his life, things start to change for her a little bit. When I first started reading this book, I did judge it a little bit. I judged it because I thought it came across as way too cute and way too sweet. I mean, you know when you bite something and it's so sweet that it makes your teeth hurt? That's how I felt reading this book in the beginning. However, as the story went along and things started to unfold, I changed. That changed for me. Because in the beginning, I thought Megs was just so focused on her brother and like nothing else. It was like she didn't have a personality. Her whole life revolved around her brother. And in my head, I'm like, that can't be all there is to her. Like, that can't be the whole story. And it wasn't, but that didn't change until a little bit farther in the book. So my criticism here would be, I think the book could have started off a little quicker, like jumped in a little quicker. And then maybe people wouldn't judge it so quickly like I did on my first viewing. But at the end of the day, this book did end up being very cute, very sweet, and I really like the way that it ended. It ended in both an expected and unexpected way, and I'll talk about this more when I do like an official review, but I ended up really enjoying it. I just wish the beginning was a little more complex and not quite as simple as it is. My third favorite book for April is Revelle by Lyssa Mia Smith, or Lyssa Mia Smith. This book was a surprising delight, This book is basically Moulin Rouge meets the Night Circus. So we have a magical family that has a magical circus show. This takes place in the 1920s, Prohibition era. So we have a main character named Lux or Revelle. She is a trapeze artist in the circus, but she has all these magical powers. But her family is struggling because they're out of money. They don't have the money that they need to buy the liquor that they need for their show. So Lux meets this wealthy time traveler, Dewey Kronos. He's rich and charming and charismatic. His family has all the money. His family runs all the liquor distribution. So Lux is like, hey, I'm gonna, shimmy up to him so that I can get the liquor for my family. But of course, Dewey is not exactly as charming as he appears to be, but Lux is willing to sacrifice anything for her family. We also have another character named Jameson, and Jameson comes to the big tent, comes to the circus, and he has his own secrets going on, but as soon as he meets Lux, oh my god, instant love, instant romance, and of course he cannot stand that Lux is sacrificing her own happiness to get to be with Dewey and get the liquor for her family. All sorts of shenanigans ensue. Like I said, if you've seen Moulin Rouge, the movie, you probably will have an inkling of where the story is going as you read it, because it basically follows the same beats. I loved Moulin Rouge. I loved that movie. I had the soundtrack. I could sing all the words. I knew all the lines. I absolutely loved that movie. So I really enjoyed this book. However, I did have an issue with the way that it ended. If you've seen Moulin Rouge and you know how that ended, I expected this book to end the same way. And if you haven't seen Moulin Rouge, I will just say that I expected this book to have a tragic ending. And in some ways it does. There are some tragic things that happened. However, this book has a much more hopeful ending, a much more positive ending. And I kind of feel like that was a cop-out. I feel like I would have respected the book more if it really took that tragic route. But it didn't. So I was kind of disappointed by the ending. But up until that point, I thought this was super fun. It's magical. It's fantasy, circuses, and it's set in a really cool era, 1920s Prohibition era New York. So it has a lot of good stuff going for it, and it's really, really fun up until that ending. All right, second favorite book of the month, and this one is a surprise to me, but that is going to be The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. Oh my god, this is a chunky 1,000-page book. I can't believe I actually finished it. I'm like, literally, I was reading it till like midnight on the 30th of April. Like, I really finished it at the very last minute. But wow, this book I had a journey with. And again, there is so much to say about this book because there's a lot in here. So what I will say now is that I went into this book blind. I read the back, which really doesn't give you that much information, but otherwise I went in blind. I have no idea what this book is about. I had no idea what the series was about. I just know that it's super popular, people really like it, and I wanted to read more Brandon Sanderson after reading the Mistborn series. Halfway, the first like 500 pages of this book, I was confused. I had no idea where the story was going. I had so many questions about, there's a lot of world building, so many questions, and I was just kind of reading along, and I was like, okay, you know, this is a good story, we've got some good characters, like, but where is it going? Like, where is all this going? And it's not until like the last 1 to 200 pages that you actually find out where it's going. And let me tell you, once I found out, like, it blew my mind. The last 1 to 200 pages of this book are absolutely incredible. Yes, I think it took a little bit too long to get there. 800 pages is a very long time to set up, to do a setup for something. But the ending of this book is just, it's amazing. It's really good. So good. I'm so glad I read it, and I can't wait to talk more about it in depth because there is a lot to talk about. So that brings me to my number one favorite book of April, a book that, as I said in the beginning, I think is nearly perfect, and that is Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo. And yes, if you're wondering, no mourners, no funerals, the official slogan of Six of Crows. I absolutely loved this book. Absolutely loved it. This book, I had heard from multiple people like the series better than Shadow and Bone. And I always wondered why. But now, having read it, now I know. Now I understand. Six of Crows is leagues better than the Shadow and Bone trilogy. Leagues better. It's got better characters that are way deeper and complex and nuanced. It's got a much better setup. It has a fun plot. It's a magical heist. It's a magical heist book. But the characters are really what make this book special. There are so many characters and they are so wonderful. If you've seen the Netflix show, you're familiar with some of them. Kaz, Jasper, Inej. Amazing characters, wonderful characters. I love getting to know all of them in the book. They are so much better in the book than they are in the TV show. I can't wait to talk about this series more. Absolutely loved it. Thought it was phenomenal and definitely my favorite book of April. So those are all my April reads ranked. So now I am quickly going to tell you what I'm going to be reading for May, starting with my reader recommendation, and that is Polar City Blues by Kathryn Kerr. This was recommended to me by Chris Sejar. She's recommended me books before. She recommended Blue Sword, which I read last summer. This is a new one. This is actually a science fiction book, and I haven't read a sci-fi in a while, so I'm really excited to dive into this one. Pretty much going in blind, and we'll see how it goes. Next up, I am continuing my Stephen King journey with book number 37, I believe, The Regulators. Now, The Regulators, technically published under Richard Bachman. I don't know why, but this book is somehow related to Desperation, which I read last month. That's the cover of Desperation on the back here. Knowing how I felt about Desperation, I'm a little worried about this one, a little nervous. But it is shorter, it is less chunky, so hopefully that means this one will be better. Next up, I have my adult fantasy of the month, and that is going to be Babel by R.F. Kuang. This is another book that I am nervous about because I've heard mixed reviews. Most recently, Kirsten over at Reading Nymph, she read this recently. She kind of had some mixed reviews about it, and I've definitely heard others have mixed reviews, but I really liked R.F. Kuang. I love the Poppy Wars. I really liked that series, so maybe this one will work out well for me, but we'll see. Next up, I have what I call my rando book, which means I just randomly pick a book off my shelf that I haven't read yet, and this month I ended up with For the Wolff by Hannah Whitten. This is a YA fantasy, and it is a Little Red Riding Hood retelling. I know that there is a series that's being built from this book. I've heard good things. I've heard Hannah Whitten's name a lot, so I thought this would be a good one to try. Again, I don't know much about it, but it felt like a good time to give this one a try. Next up, I have my YA fantasy, and I am going back to the Throne of Glass series and Heir of Fire, Sarah J. Maas. This is the third book in her Throne of Glass series. I really liked books 1 and 2, so I am hopeful that I'll really like this one, although I believe this is the chunkiest one of the bunch so far, so really looking forward to seeing where Selena's adventures take her in this book. Things are really starting to expand in this world, and I'm excited to dive in. I have very high hopes for this one. Next up, I have my middle grade book, and I did struggle with this one a bit. I struggled with deciding which middle grade book I wanted to tackle this month, and I ended up picking Queste by Angie Sage. This is the 4th book in her Septimus Heap series. I had read the first 3 earlier this year. 1, I really enjoyed. 2, I didn't like. And 3, I thought was okay. So I was a little hesitant to continue the series, but I have all the books. If I don't read them like now, I'm probably never going to. So I'm going to give book 4 a try. If book 4 does not go well, I'm going to have to get rid of the rest of the series. So keep your fingers crossed that this one ends up being a good book. And finally, I have my book box book of the month, and that is The Ones We're Meant to Find by Joan. I actually did a poll over on my Instagram the other week. So if you took part in that poll, thank you for voting and helping me pick this one out. This is another science fiction book, actually. So I have 2 sci-fi books that I'm reading in May, even though I haven't read a sci-fi book probably since last year. But I have heard some good things about this one. So again, my expectations are up that this turns out to be a good read. There you have it, my April wrap-up and my May TBR. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, you were rewarded with a Meepers. Oh, thank you for giving me some kisses, Meeps. Oh, thank you so much. So now I want to know from you, what are you reading in May? What was your favorite book of April? Let me know in the comments section below. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you're not already, please subscribe to my channel. It really helps me out. And I'll be back soon with more bookish videos and more furry friends. All right, everyone. Thanks for watching and happy reading.